Assisting me in the Opani department, all friends of the program. First, Matt Welch, editor-in-chief of Reason Magazine. He's also the co-author of the book with Nick Gillespie entitled The Declaration of Independence. And by the way, he's also a former assistant editorial pages editor at the Los Angeles Times. Matt Welch, good to have you back, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
On board as well, another old friend, Robert Weiner, Democratic strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton drug czar General Barry McCaffrey. He's also former chief of staff of the House Committee on Aging, and by the way, was also the communications director at one time for Congressman Rangel of New York, as well as Congressman Conyers of Michigan. Bob, good to have you back.
Alan, it's good to be with you, but you threw a lot of stuff out there. I was with the president this whole last week pretty much at 4 different White House news conferences and events, and you mentioned the Benghazi deaths and Hillary's role in the White House cover-up. There was no role. The Republicans changed the talking points and paraphrased them, CBS report today. Then you talk about Associated Press and the leaks. After Rogers, the chairman, the Republican chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, and other Republicans demanded the investigation of the leaks. And you talk about the IRS's investigation, and that was by a George Bush appointee, and they actually fired the wrong guy. But and that Bush guy is now moved over to doing something else. They got to fire him too. So that's what there's nothing there, as the president said. There's no there, and the Republicans are obsessive compulsive and trying to say it's bigger than Watergate and Iran-Contra combined. Nonsense.
As usual, I see you haven't lost your proclivity for taking many minute peripheral observations, inferring them as if they were all conclusive analyses, and then accordingly projecting them as such, and still expecting to be taken seriously. But of course, in a true, fervent, Socratic dialogue, point, counterpoint, 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 you lose your ass, as will be momentarily shown in just a little bit. But I'll tell you what, I want to go ahead right now and focus on the IRS. The IRS has essentially been caught flagging organizations seeking tax-exempt nonprofit applications, those applications with words like Tea Party, Patriots, or instances in which they talked about how to make America a better place to live, or maybe they were critical of how the country was being run. Guess what? Even folks like Chris Matthews of MSNBC says that the administration claiming they couldn't have done anything about the IRS political profiling is essentially tantamount to saying that the quote-unquote steering wheel no longer controls the car. He added that the voters deserve better. Derek, I tell you what, let's have a listen to Mr. Matthews on this very issue, if you please.
When you pick Obama, you want to know that the steering wheel that you just turned to the left a little bit, you want that to matter. That means you want that president you voted for to run things. That's the only power you have as a citizen. Pick the person you want to run things, and then they run them. For anybody to run around in Washington and say, well, we don't run the IRS, or we can't control the Justice Department, and I'm recusing myself, and I'm recusing it. Everybody's saying the steering wheel doesn't control the car anymore. The voter out there says, wait a minute, I voted. I want the person I voted for to be in charge so I can vote against him or her next time. That's the only power I have. And you're telling me I don't have it because you don't have it. And that's going to really bug people, especially people that care about government doing a good job.
Matt Welch, to you, has this MSNBC talk host somehow managed to stumble into reality for a change? Matt Welch.
Well, there's always the pundit's kind of fallacy that a president can just make a speech or take one action and, solve everything or get a piece of legislation passed. So part of that plays into there. However, a vibe of what he's saying is no doubt true. I mean, Obama is the boss of 4 million people, so it is a big bureaucracy out there. But also, he won the initial election in no small part because of a lot of voters were disgusted, and rightly so, with the kind of incompetence of George W. Bush, both in managing Iraq and managing things that the federal government had to do with Hurricane Katrina and some other issues like this. What we're seeing here is just kind of organizational mismanagement at the best. At the worst, it could be obviously much worse. What interests me here is that I'm kind of more alarmed not by the overheated, this is Richard Nixon 2.0 rhetoric, which we don't know, we have to investigate it, but more about if it wasn't. If we take the president and everybody else at their word entirely, then what we might be facing instead is a kind of institutional unknowing bias. That might just well be pervasive in the office in Cincinnati and maybe in the IRS writ large. That to me is so much more alarming because if these people don't even feel like they're enforcing any kind of agenda, that just means that their filter, the way they look at the world, is one that treats the Tea Party and conservative right-of-center groups with heightened alarm and awareness, egged on or, reflecting a certain feeling that you have in the culture both of media and of democratic politics. But that is so much more alarming because how do you stop that? How do you root that out? How many people do you have to fire to fix that problem? So for me, the best case scenario in terms of the narrow kind of question on Obama actually is more disturbing, if that makes sense.
I hear you. Bob, to you, we're constantly hearing from Team Obama and his apologists, such as you, the usual quote-unquote stop being political defense whenever they're challenged on any of these scandals. But Bob, if accountability can't be demanded because of its inherent political repercussions, wouldn't that permit party-driven government to always be able to dodge accountability? Wouldn't that permit party-driven government to become answerable to none?
Well, I actually think, Matt, that you are the voice of reason. There must be a reason you're the editor of that magazine.
Thank you.
And when he says that it's not necessarily Watergate revisited, that we have to look at the facts, he's exactly right. And I also agree with Matt that this may be a case of mismanagement. That's not impeachable. So there's so much overheated rhetoric, as Matt said. I do.
But even if we go with what you're saying, Bob, even if we go with what you're saying, that it might be bad management, they're dodging that level of accountability as well. So it almost undercuts your position.
And there are a lot of people, even on the MSNBCs, that say that is a case, that there should be more monitoring. But, there's a counter-argument to that, Alan and Matt. The Nixon-Mitchell ties are the reason we have tried to have divestiture and independence of our agencies. That was outrageous, what Mitchell did for Nixon during Watergate as in engineering the cover-up. So we would be criticizing, and the right would be criticizing Obama if he were tied to the IRS and monitoring what they did, or tied to the Justice Department and monitoring.
Well, people believe that things happen because of the tone set at the top. Folks feel that things happen because the tone set at the top. You have to understand, almost 300. Let me finish. Almost 300 conservative groups were flagged for scrutiny, not one single liberal. So when the administration asserts, and when the DOJ asserts, and when the IRS asserts that there were no political motivations, it seems to stretch credulity to the snapping point, because it just isn't believable. How can you have 300 chosen from the conservative, not one from the liberal, and then still assert with a straight face that it wasn't political? Also, the administration seemingly argues. The administration seemingly argues that because pressing for accountability carries political consequences, and of course we're not supposed to be political about such things, that said accountability shouldn't be pursued.
Of what he was asked to investigate, that there was also delays on liberal applications as well. That's the news that came out this morning.
With you right now with all friends to the show. First, Matt Welsh, editor-in-chief of Reason Magazine. He's also co-author of the book with Nick Gillespie, The Declaration of Independence. And by the way, he's former assistant editorial pages editor at the Los Angeles Times. Matt, good to have you back.
Thank you very much, sir.
On board as well, another old friend of the show, Bob. Anyway, I was saying, I'm just kidding, Bob Weiner, Democratic strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton Drug Czar General Barry McCaffrey. Bob, always a pleasure. Guys, let me get into something right now. I want to ask this of you first, Matt. What do you make of Obama's grandiose display of firing acting IRS chief Stephen Miller, given that the guy was slated to leave next month anyway? I mean, isn't that a bit like kicking your son out of the house around the same time he's moving into his own apartment anyway?
A little bit. It's a very, very tentative first step at accountability, and it's not very satisfying. I think Lois Lerner, if I'm getting her name right, should also be fired. Remember that she said as recently as last Friday that she heard about this for the first time in 2012, when in fact now the Inspector General's report tells us that she heard about this for the first time in 2010. There is a managerial culture of not being straight with Congress, particularly Republican congressmen, about this. That is a problem. That's not low level. That's people at the top answering questions under fire from conservatives who were complaining, and Tea Party groups who were complaining about this in 2012, saying, there's no problem. They, in September 2012, they knew that the Inspector General was going to report that they had a problem on their hands, and they refused to tell Congress because, September 2012 is not necessarily a particularly fortuitous time to have this scandal erupt. So that says to me those are people who are making some interesting and bad calculations of dishonesty on a managerial level. At the very minimum, the people who have obviously lied by now should be fired, and that is the ripest area of investigation right now going forward. Why did they make those decisions? What was the calculation? Did they just flat out lie to people in order to make a scandal go away?
And did anybody else perhaps know about it? Derek, to you, before I go to Bob, I want to share with everybody this clip of Jay Carney. This would be part of our Joseph clips as well, but number 3, the file is Carney, Carney, if IR Daily News. Do you have that? We played a little early. Have a listen to what Jay Carney had to say with some in response to some reporters that who apparently put this guy in a bit of a cul-de-sac, and he sounds kind of, well, rhetorically clumsy, to put it charitably. Have a listen.
We have seen the reports, as the president said, and if the reports are true, he would consider them outrageous.
Even this IRS has acknowledged that some of this wrongdoing has happened. So the president and this administration could agree.
And I think you heard the president say yesterday that if it turns out to be the case.
Can you say categorically that nobody at the White House and nobody on the president's political team had any knowledge or was involved in any way in the targeting of Tea Party groups by the IRS?
Yes.
You've asserted something categorically.
No,
I'm trying to understand how you know that.
I am certainly not aware of and am confident that no one here was involved in this. We found out about it just a few weeks ago, and only, when I say we, I didn't, the president didn't.
Do you have any facts?
You're asking me to prove a negative, Hans.
Well, you've made the assertion. You've asserted that you're confident that no one, you're the one that actually put it out.
Again, you heard the president express his views, and we're going to wait and see what the facts are based on Inspector General review.
Bob, this is so classic. He, on one hand, asserts that he knows without a doubt that nobody in the White House had anything to do with it. But on the other hand, when he's challenged about it, he says, hey, what do you expect me to do, prove a negative? The guy sets himself up for a fall, and then he bitches about others hurting him. How does he get away with this?
Well, he also said, I'm confident that there is no one here who was involved.
Afterwards, initially he said he knew for sure.
Let me add. No, he mixed up his answers a little. Let me add to them. By the way, I happen to think Jay Carney is one of the superb, knowledgeable, amazing, adroit folks out there, because I've been to so many of his briefings, and besides, he calls on me occasionally, so I like it. Hey, I want to add to the mix here.
Okay.
It's Matt, what do you make of this Bush appointee who was in charge when all this happened? That's a serious question. I mean, I'd give it that Obama may have fired the wrong guy, and then the guy has the gall to say he'll leave in a month. Hey, he'll leave when the president tells him to leave. So, I mean, the guy's sort of I don't want to use dirty words here on the show, but what do you make of the fact that it was a Bush appointee? So it isn't really political. The other question that I want to throw out there
Whoa. I can't let you get away with that. Holy, you know what? You're tapping into something. No. You can't. No, when you say that, when you say it's not really political, you're stretching credulity to the snapping point, which I'm looking at the time right now. So it kind of actually gives me an opportunity to segue into.
Well, what do you make of that?
Under the same category, well, you know what? So what? You had Democratic. You had Democratic appointees during the Bush administration who were attached to agencies that would also occasionally get into trouble. And I don't know that the difference in political association gives them any kind of a realistic escape hatch of accountability. But here's what I want to point out. This is what is more important for me right now. Even though, and then I'll go to you, Matt, right after I get this answer from Bob, even though the Treasury's Inspector General rakes the IRS over the coals for selectively targeting conservatives, the same Treasury Inspector General insists that the screeners at the IRS were not motivated by a partisan agenda, sort of echoing what Bob is now saying now. As the Washington Post reports, quote, it suggested that they were trying to come up with a more efficient system for screening applications from political advocacy groups, which have proliferated in recent years, unquote. But Bob, if that were true, why wasn't there even a single, or as you say, maybe now a few, but why were there then so few liberal groups similarly scrutinized?
Well, it takes 9 to 12 months for approval. So how can you say that these people weren't screened and scrutinized? It takes forever to get approval.
No, Bob, I'm saying if there is indeed no partisan agenda, why were 300 chosen from the right and virtually none from the left?
Alan, I think there may have been some lower-level hanky-panky. That does strike me, in all honesty. I think that there may
come on, Bob, you're too intelligent for this. Sometimes even your own intellect will deny you from detouring a thought pattern onto whatever self-indulgent road of escapism you prefer.
Hanky-panky. It was lower level hanky-panky, if it was, and I hope that it comes and gets rooted out. And you know what's got to happen? That's the point I was going to make a second ago. When in the 50s, the Eisenhower guy changed the wording from exclusively social program to primarily, as people have been saying now and joking on TV, would you allow that change in the marital contract? So there's a terrible wording that has to be changed. That's the root of all evil here.